What if I told you the world you know, the freedom to move, to explore, to simply be global, is vanishing? What if I told you your very passport, once a symbol of boundless opportunity, is now a mark of exclusion? This isn't a hypothetical. This isn't a dystopian novel. This is happening right now. In the last 18 months, while the world was distracted by headlines, a silent, unprecedented geopolitical shift began. Borders, once open, slammed shut. All access denied. And the targets? Americans. We've uncovered a shocking truth. 10 nations once welcoming, once vital allies, have suddenly, without warning, banned American citizens from their borders. Entire populations of U.S. travelers, residents, and even those with deep family ties, simply locked out forever. And the reasons? They'll shock you to your core, from devastating economic collapses to unseen biological threats, from radical shifts in global power to outright diplomatic warfare. But here's the most terrifying twist of all. If this trend continues, how many more nations will follow? Could your next vacation, your next business trip, your family reunion abroad become an impossibility? Could the American passport, once the world's most powerful, soon become a barrier instead of a bridge? Stay with us, because what you're about to see will change how you view America's place in the world forever. For decades, the American passport was a golden ticket, a symbol of influence, economic might, and global connectivity. But that era, my friends, is collapsing before our very eyes. We're living through a quiet cataclysm, a geopolitical fracturing driven by forces few are willing to acknowledge. While the world was busy watching trade wars and domestic political battles, something far more sinister was taking root. A distrust, a resentment, a reevaluation of alliances that few could have predicted. Nations once eager for American tourism and investment are now viewing U.S. citizens not as guests, but as threats. In Q3 of last year alone, international travel from the U.S. plummeted by an unprecedented 45%. Before, these bans were even widely reported. Why? Because the ground was already shifting. Whispers of new diseases, fears of economic contagion, and a profound reordering of global power dynamics were already underway. Governments, facing internal strife and unprecedented external pressures, began making unthinkable choices. Choices that directly targeted the flow of people, specifically Americans. This isn't just about a virus anymore. This is about national sovereignty, economic survival, and a radical redefinition of global citizenship. And the first 10 dominoes to fall have sent shockwaves across the diplomatic landscape. Which countries dared to make such a drastic move? You won't believe what's truly happening behind closed borders. Let's begin with a nation once synonymous with precision, order, and a deep appreciation for international tourism: Japan. But what happened next in the land of the rising sun will leave you speechless. On the morning of September 12th at 4:30 a.m. Tokyo time, a terse, unprecedented statement was issued by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Effective immediately, all entry for U.S. citizens, regardless of visa status, was suspended indefinitely. No exceptions, no grace period. Tourists, business travelers, even those with long-term residency visas were given 24 hours to leave or face deportation. The official reason? A devastating new hyper-mutated pathogen, dubbed Variant Omega, reported to have originated from a major U.S. festival, had somehow breached Japan's vaunted biosecurity defenses. While U.S. health officials dismissed the claims as exaggerated, the Japanese government presented satellite imagery of unprecedented patient surges in U.S. cities and a leaked WHO preliminary report that hinted at airborne transmission beyond anything previously seen. The fear in Tokyo was palpable. A single carrier, they claimed, could cripple their entire infrastructure within weeks. But here's the twist. Behind the scenes, sources within the Japanese financial sector reveal a deeper, more chilling motive. Japan's economy, already teetering from demographic collapse and a weakening yen, was buckling under the weight of global supply chain disruptions, largely attributed to U.S.-China tensions. Many in the ruling party privately argued that the continuous inflow of American tourists and business travelers, while once a boon, was now a liability, draining resources, straining public services, and importing economic instability. The variant Omega was a convenient, unchallengeable pretext to implement a radical, isolationist economic policy designed to protect their dwindling resources. They chose national survival over international relations. Thousands of Americans were stranded, their lives uprooted in an instant. Families separated, businesses collapsed. And the message was clear. Japan, once an unwavering ally, was now prepared to cut off even its closest partners if it meant preserving its own fragile future. But if you thought this was an isolated incident, wait until you see what's happening in South Korea. It's far more complex and far more dangerous. From the meticulously organized streets of Tokyo, we shift focus to a nation on the razor's edge of geopolitical tension: South Korea. For years, the alliance between the U.S. and South Korea was a bedrock of regional stability. But that bedrock has shattered. On October 5th, a mere 3 weeks after Japan's shocking decree, Seoul issued its own stunning announcement: a full and immediate travel ban on all U.S. passport holders. The stated reason? An unprecedented and sophisticated cyber attack that crippled South Korea's national infrastructure, including critical energy grids, financial networks, and advanced defense systems. The attack, they claimed, bore the digital fingerprints of a state-sponsored entity operating through proxies traced back to IP addresses within the United States. While Washington vehemently denied culpability, accusing Seoul of falling prey to disinformation, the South Korean government released what it called irrefutable evidence, declassified intelligence, detailing how the cyber attack exploited vulnerabilities in software widely used by U.S. tech companies, and how specific sleepers embedded within the financial sector, including individuals with dual U.S. nationality, allegedly facilitated the breach. The narrative crafted by Seoul painted American influence as a Trojan horse for digital espionage, a direct threat to their sovereignty in an escalating, undeclared cyber war. But here's the terrifying twist. Independent intelligence analysts whisper that the true motive runs far deeper than just a cyber attack. With North Korea's aggressive posturing escalating to alarming levels, including multiple failed satellite launches, hinting at ICBM development, a powerful faction within the South Korean military and government is pushing for a radical new strategy: complete self-reliance, free from the perceived liabilities of U.S. military entanglements. They view the U.S. presence as a constant provocation, drawing Seoul into conflicts it cannot afford. The travel ban, therefore, serves a dual purpose: a public act of defiance against a perceived aggressor, and a strategic distancing from an alliance they believe has become a hindrance to their own survival in a rapidly destabilizing region. The message to Washington: we are on our own now. The ban sent shockwaves through the thousands of American military families and civilians still stationed in the country, forcing immediate, chaotic evacuations. What happens when an ally, under existential threat, decides you are part of the problem, not the solution? And if a staunch ally like South Korea can turn its back, what about a nation at the heart of Europe? Prepare yourself for the unbelievable truth about Germany. From the tech hubs of Asia, we plunge into the heart of Europe, to a nation that for decades was the undisputed economic engine of the continent, Germany. On November 1st, a date that will forever live in infamy for transatlantic relations, Berlin announced its own stunning edict: an indefinite ban on all non-essential travel from the United States. The official declaration cited a critical and unsustainable surge in social unrest, violent protests, and widespread economic collapse sweeping across the U.S., creating an unacceptable security risk for German citizens and infrastructure. They pointed to televised images of resource scarcity, widespread looting, and escalating civil conflicts within American cities, painting a picture of a nation in utter freefall, whose internal chaos could no longer be contained by its borders. The German chancellor, in a televised address, stated, "We cannot allow the instability of one nation, however powerful it once was, to jeopardize the hard-won peace and stability of our own." This was followed by an immediate tightening of all borders, not just to U.S. citizens, but a full suspension of Schengen area mobility, plunging Europe into an unprecedented state of nationalistic protectionism. But here's the chilling twist. Beneath the veneer of security risk lies a far more cynical truth. Germany, along with the wider European Union, is facing an existential economic crisis. A catastrophic energy shortage, the collapse of global trade agreements, and the implosion of key financial institutions across the continent has left them scrambling. Many within the German parliament privately admitted that the U.S., facing its own economic meltdown, was seen not just as a source of instability, but as a direct competitor for dwindling resources and global investment. The ban on American entry was less about security and more about severing a perceived economic anchor, a desperate attempt to insulate their struggling economy from the contagion of America's decline. They were effectively saying, "Your crisis is no longer our crisis." Thousands of American expatriates, many having lived in Germany for decades, were given mere days to pack their lives. This wasn't just a travel ban. It was a profound declaration of economic and geopolitical divorce from the very nation that had helped rebuild post-war Europe. And if Europe's strongest economy can resort to such desperate measures, what could happen in a developing giant like Brazil, a country battling a whole different kind of collapse? From the industrial heartland of Germany, our journey takes a stark turn to the vibrant, yet increasingly volatile, South American giant, Brazil. On December 15th, the Brazilian government enacted a sweeping, nationwide state of emergency, swiftly followed by a full closure of all international borders to U.S. citizens. The official decree cited a catastrophic convergence of environmental collapse and a humanitarian crisis of unimaginable scale. They specifically pointed to the accelerated destruction of the Amazon rainforest, not just from local actions, but from what they termed nefarious foreign interests tied to U.S.-based agricultural conglomerates and mining operations, which had led to unprecedented droughts, raging wildfires, and the emergence of drug-resistant pathogens from newly exposed ecosystems. The crisis spiraled. Vast swathes of the Amazon became uninhabitable, triggering a mass exodus of climate refugees within Brazil, overwhelming major cities already struggling with dwindling resources. The government declared that the continued presence of U.S. citizens, particularly those tied to corporate entities or even tourism in sensitive ecological zones, constituted a direct exacerbation of their national emergency. They were not merely banning tourists, they were expelling what they considered instruments of environmental degradation. But here's the unexpected twist. The ban was also a desperate attempt by Brazil's struggling leadership to consolidate power amidst unprecedented internal unrest. With millions displaced and vital resources dwindling, public outrage against perceived foreign exploitation had reached a fever pitch. By severing ties with the U.S., the government aimed to externalize blame, rally nationalist sentiment, and project an image of decisive action in the face of insurmountable odds. It was a cynical political maneuver, capitalizing on a genuine crisis to scapegoat a powerful external force. The immediate fallout saw thousands of American missionaries, environmental workers, and even long-term residents forced into a chaotic evacuation, often under the watchful, hostile eyes of locals who had been fed a steady diet of anti-American propaganda. But if Brazil's ban was about protecting its rapidly disappearing natural wealth, what could compel a nation as stable and strategically vital as South Africa to follow suit? The answer lies in the ground beneath their feet. Our chilling journey now takes us to the southern tip of Africa, to a nation grappling with its past and now a terrifying future. South Africa. On January 20th, a mere month after Brazil's decree, Pretoria issued a stunning ultimatum. All U.S. citizens were to be denied entry, effective immediately, citing a newly declared national resource security emergency. The official statement detailed an escalating crisis of water scarcity, critical mineral depletion, and uncontrollable internal conflicts driven by desperate competition for dwindling resources. They specifically accused large, U.S.-backed multinational corporations of rapacious exploitation of their diamond, gold, and rare earth mineral reserves, leaving behind ecological devastation and exacerbating the water crisis that had brought the nation to its knees. The South African government presented what it called irrefutable proof that U.S. corporate entities, through opaque subsidiaries and illicit dealings, were siphoning off vital resources, diverting water, and destabilizing local economies, directly contributing to the nation's unfolding collapse. They argued that the continued presence of U.S. citizens, whether corporate executives or even aid workers, provided cover for these predatory practices and posed an existential threat to the nation's remaining wealth. But here's the brutal twist. While corporate exploitation was indeed a factor, intelligence reports suggest that the true catalyst was a desperate power grab by a new, radicalized political faction within the South African government. Facing widespread public unrest and the specter of civil war, this faction seized upon the resource crisis as a pretext to declare a state of emergency, consolidate power, and nationalize key industries. The ban on American citizens served as a public declaration of independence from Western economic influence, a rallying cry for a new isolationist, resource protectionist agenda. It was a calculated move to rewrite their economic future, regardless of the cost to international relations. Thousands of U.S. citizens, including those working in essential aid organizations and long-term residents, found themselves caught in a rapidly closing trap. The world watched in disbelief as one of Africa's most developed nations chose self-imposed isolation over international engagement. But if these economic and environmental pressures weren't enough, Imagine a country so insulated, so determined to survive a global cataclysm, that it willingly cuts itself off entirely. Welcome to the grim reality of New Zealand. From the resource-rich plains of South Africa, we leap across the globe to the isolated, seemingly idyllic islands of New Zealand. For years, New Zealand was touted as a global safe haven, a pristine ark against the rising tides of global instability. But on February 10th, the dream shattered. Wellington announced a radical new policy: permanent sovereign border closure to all citizens of nations deemed high risk for importing global instability, disease, or resource drain. The United States, due to its ongoing internal conflicts, economic volatility, and the uncontrolled spread of new, unidentified contagions, was placed at the very top of that blacklist. All U.S. citizens were immediately banned from entry, and existing visa holders were given 72 hours to depart. The official explanation was chillingly pragmatic. New Zealand, with its limited landmass and fragile ecosystems, could not risk any external factor that might jeopardize its long-term survival. They unveiled a staggering national defense plan, converting vast swathes of their coastline into heavily fortified zones, effectively turning the island nation into a self-sufficient fortress. They argued that global interdependence had proven to be a fatal flaw, and their only path forward was absolute autonomy, even if it meant severing ties with former allies. But here's the profound twist. This wasn't merely a response to immediate crises. It was the culmination of a decade-long, covert national strategy. While the world focused on climate change and pandemics, New Zealand's top strategists had been quietly preparing for a complete global societal collapse. The travel ban was the final critical step in their ARC protocol, a preemptive strike to protect their carefully curated, hyper-efficient, and increasingly authoritarian society from the inevitable fallout of a world gone mad. They had built a lifeboat, and they were prepared to cut the rope. Thousands of Americans with dreams of a peaceful, secluded life in New Zealand found their hopes utterly dashed. The closure was a stark reminder: when survival is paramount, even the most cherished international relationships can be sacrificed without a second thought. But if a nation can isolate itself for survival, what about one that turns its back on a former enemy? Choosing a new global alignment entirely. Prepare for the stunning reversal in Vietnam. Our grim tour continues, taking us from the remote fortresses of New Zealand to the rapidly developing, strategically vital nation of Vietnam. For decades, the relationship between the United States and Vietnam had been one of cautious reconciliation, marked by growing trade, tourism, and diplomatic engagement. But on March 18th, that delicate balance was shattered. Hanoi issued a swift, unambiguous travel prohibition for all U.S. citizens, citing unspecified security concerns and a re-evaluation of national development priorities. The immediate trigger, according to leaked diplomatic cables, was a new multi-trillion-dollar economic and military pact signed with an emerging global superpower, a pact that explicitly required Vietnam to sever certain long-standing Western ties. The Vietnamese government, in a rare public statement, emphasized its right to pursue independent development pathways, implicitly criticizing what it termed Western interference in its internal affairs and regional alliances. All U.S. investment visas were revoked, and American businesses operating in the country were given a mere 30 days to liquidate assets and depart. The message was clear: A new global order was emerging, and Vietnam had chosen its side. But here's the geopolitical twist. This was not just about security concerns. It was a calculated, strategic pivot. Vietnam, recognizing the waning influence of the US in Southeast Asia and the escalating global competition, made a cold, pragmatic decision to align itself fully with a rising Eastern Bloc. The ban on American citizens was a symbolic, yet highly effective, demonstration of its commitment to this new alliance, a public rejection of its past, and a clear signal that it would no longer tolerate any perceived Western hegemonic influence. Hundreds of thousands of American tourists, veterans, and business professionals who had once found opportunity and reconciliation in Vietnam were summarily expelled. It was a shocking return to a Cold War-era mentality, a stark reminder that historical adversaries can resurface and that geopolitical allegiances can shift with breathtaking speed. And if a former adversary can turn its back, what about an ancient civilization grappling with a crisis as old as time itself? Our next destination, Egypt. From the bustling markets of Hanoi, we now turn our gaze to the cradle of civilization, a land steeped in history and now teetering on the brink of an environmental catastrophe, Egypt. On April 25th, the Egyptian government declared a national water emergency, immediately followed by an executive order banning all entry for U.S. citizens. The official reason was dire. The Nile River, the very lifeblood of Egypt, was at its lowest levels in recorded history, a crisis exacerbated by upstream dam projects and climate change, but, critically, which the Egyptian government squarely blamed on international inaction and insufficient aid from Western powers, specifically the United States. They argued that continued U.S. tourism and expatriate presence was an unacceptable drain on their dwindling water resources and an affront to the millions of Egyptians facing severe shortages. The declaration detailed how major agricultural regions were turning to dust, leading to unprecedented food insecurity and sparking violent clashes over the last remaining water sources. The government stated that every single drop of water was now a matter of national survival, and the entry of non-essential foreign nationals, particularly from high-consumption nations, could no longer be tolerated. But here's the tragic twist. While the water crisis was undeniably real and catastrophic, the ban also served as a desperate political maneuver by a government struggling to maintain control amidst escalating public fury. Facing widespread civil unrest and the specter of a complete societal breakdown, the leadership used the ban on Americans as a visible act of defiance against perceived foreign indifference, aiming to consolidate nationalist sentiment and deflect blame for the internal failures. It was a last-ditch effort to portray strength and sovereignty in the face of an existential threat. Thousands of American archaeologists, aid workers, and tourists, many caught in transit, were refused entry or summarily expelled. The pyramids watched silently as a nation, once a symbol of human endurance, crumbled under the weight of an environmental crisis and a desperate attempt to externalize blame. But if a crisis of resources can shut down an ancient land, what could compel America's closest neighbor, its most reliable trading partner, to seal its borders? Brace yourself for the unthinkable truth about Canada. From the ancient sands of Egypt, we arrive at a place that for millions of Americans represents familiarity, friendship, and open borders: Canada. The news hit like a Category 5 hurricane. On May 10th, Ottawa, without preamble, announced a full, indefinite closure of its 5,525-mile border to all non-essential U.S. citizens, effective within 12 hours. The official statement was chillingly blunt. Canada was implementing unprecedented national protection measures due to the accelerating economic contagion, social fragmentation, and escalating civil unrest emanating directly from the United States. They cited a dramatic surge in cross-border smuggling of illegal firearms, narcotics, and dangerous extremist ideologies, warning that America's internal unraveling posed an intolerable direct threat to Canadian national security and stability. The Canadian Prime Minister, in a somber address, stated, "We have always stood with our American friends, but the gravity of the situation south of our border demands that we prioritize the safety and sovereignty of our own citizens above all else. This decision was not made lightly, but it was made definitively." The immediate effect was chaos, families separated across the vast border, essential supply chains fractured, and billions in cross-border trade instantly frozen. But here's the brutal twist that will haunt generations. While the official reasons had some basis in truth, the real motive was a desperate attempt by Canada to escape America's economic gravitational pull. Years of deep integration had left the Canadian economy dangerously dependent on its southern neighbor. As the U.S. economy imploded, Canada realized it was being dragged down too. A new, radical protectionist government had quietly seized power, viewing America not as a partner, but as a liability. The border closure was a calculated, preemptive strike to sever economic ties, to try and save Canada from being collateral damage in America's decline, even if it meant sacrificing the deepest friendship in modern history. For millions of Americans with family in Canada, or those who relied on cross-border travel for work, their lives were instantly, irrevocably altered. It was a geopolitical divorce of unprecedented scale, a chilling testament to how quickly even the strongest bonds can break when national survival is on the line. But if America's closest ally can take such drastic action, what about a nation built on the very premise of stability, neutrality, and financial integrity? Our final and perhaps most unsettling destination, Switzerland. Our final stop is a nation synonymous with precision, neutrality, and impenetrable financial security, Switzerland. On June 1st, a date that sent shockwaves through global markets, the Swiss Federal Council issued a terse, two-sentence declaration. All entry for U.S. citizens, regardless of purpose, was suspended until further notice, no explanation, no press conference. The only follow-up was a leaked memo from the Swiss National Bank, citing an unprecedented influx of illicit capital and destabilizing financial instruments, traced directly to collapsing U.S. markets and what they termed rogue actors, attempting to exploit Switzerland's banking system as a last refuge for rapidly evaporating wealth. While the U.S. Treasury Department condemned the move as an act of economic aggression, Switzerland's silence was deafening. They simply closed their borders and froze countless assets, refusing all diplomatic overtures. The message was clear: Switzerland, the world's ultimate safe haven, was no longer safe for Americans, or for the chaotic financial currents they carried. But here's the truly alarming twist. This wasn't merely about protecting their banking system from bad money. It was about protecting their entire society from the contagion of what they viewed as an irredeemably broken global financial order, an order they believed was being actively dismantled by U.S. economic policies. Switzerland had been quietly developing its own sovereign digital currency, its own decentralized financial network, and its own self-sufficient supply chains. The ban on American citizens was the final step in their long-term strategy to become a completely insulated, independent economic fortress, impervious to external shocks. They had chosen to opt out of the global financial system as we know it, and America was the first dramatic casualty of their new isolated paradigm. For American ultra-wealthy, for those with hidden accounts, for the hundreds of thousands of U.S. citizens who saw Switzerland as a bastion of stability, the door was slammed shut. The ultimate symbol of neutrality had taken an unambiguous side, its own. 10 countries, 10 sudden, shocking bans. From the economic powerhouses of Europe and Asia to the ancient lands of Africa and the Americas, a chilling pattern has emerged. The world is changing, not with a bang, but with the quiet, devastating click of locked borders. What does this mean for America? It means a significant erosion of our global standing, our economic influence, and our very freedom of movement. Your American passport, once a symbol of unrivaled access, is becoming a mark of exclusion. This isn't just about tourism. It's about commerce, diplomacy, scientific exchange, and the very fabric of international relations. The financial fallout, the diplomatic isolation, and the profound shift in global perception are only just beginning. Will this trigger a domino effect? Could more nations, facing their own internal pressures, decide that cutting ties with the U.S. is a matter of national survival? Could the American century be ending, not with a roar, but with a whimper of rejected visas and closed borders? This is just the beginning. The world is recalibrating, forming new alliances, building new walls, and America, once the undisputed leader, finds itself increasingly isolated. Do you think America can recover from this unprecedented isolation? Or is the decline inevitable, leading to a new era of nationalistic fortresses and diminished global influence? Let us know in the comments below. Your perspective might surprise us and spark the debate the world desperately needs. And if you want to stay ahead of the curve, if you want the truth about the silent shifts reshaping our world, the stories the mainstream media won't touch, then you need to subscribe to this channel. Hit that subscribe button and notification bell now, because next week's revelation could impact you directly. Don't be caught unprepared.